Let's start with something no one likes to admit. Rejection hurts, not just because someone said no, but because of what that no awakens inside you. It's easy to think rejection is about them, but Carl Jung invites us to look deeper. He wrote, "Everything that irritates us in others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." In that sense, rejection isn't an attack, it's a mirror. It doesn't just reflect loss, it reflects your own inner fracture, the part of you that still craves, still doubts, still hides. And that's why it stings. Not because you were denied, but because something in you was just exposed. Rejection doesn't break you. It introduces you to the part of yourself you've kept in the dark. So the real question isn't, why did they reject me? It's, what part of me have I been rejecting first? Rejection doesn't just happen when someone says no. It often begins long before, in the energy you carry, the silent message behind your words. Please choose me. Here's the paradox no one tells you. The more you chase approval, the more invisible you become. Because Neediness, however well disguised, is psychologically repellent. We are hardwired, through millions of years of evolution, to detect desperation. Not because we're cruel, but because neediness signals instability, unpredictability, even danger. That's why it doesn't matter how kind, smart, or generous you are. If your energy says, "I need you to validate me," people subconsciously pull away. And this is where the desperation loop begins. You feel rejection. You panics. You try harder, but more agreeable, more available, more perfect. The harder you try to earn connection, the more you dissolve the self that was once attractive. Why? Because real attraction isn't earned through effort. It's generated through self-possession. People aren't magnetized by those who need them. They're drawn to those who don't. Not out of arrogance, but because self-sufficiency feels safe. It radiates clarity, and clarity is power. This is why chasing rarely results in closeness. Why? Convincing rarely leads to love. The moment you leave yourself to win someone over, you lose the very thing that made you magnetic. Inner sovereignty not. Pursuit creates gravity. When you're grounded in your own value, when you no longer require permission to feel worthy, you emit something rare. A presence that isn't asking, begging, or proving. And the world feels that. The mind resists what clings, but it's intrigued by what chooses itself. This is not about game playing or manipulation. It's about returning to your source. Because chasing is a symptom, the signal that you've disconnected from your own center and handed your power to someone else. So the question becomes, how do you reclaim it? And what creates sovereignty? Jung's answer: the integration of the shadow. If you want to stop being defined by rejection, you have to stop rejecting yourself. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming a whole, integrated being, not by chasing perfection, but by reclaiming the parts of you you've been taught to disown. At the heart of this process lies what Jung called the shadow, the aspects of your personality that remain hidden, not because they're evil, but because they're unknown, ignored, suppressed, unmet. These include your shame, your envy, your anger, but also your unexpressed power, passion, and confidence. The shadow isn't just your shame. It's also your unrealized power, gifts you've buried because they felt too much, too different, too bold. And here's the twist. The more you deny your shadow, the more power it has over you. Unconsciously, you start projecting it onto others. You attract rejection not because of who you truly are, but because you keep operating from what you refuse to face. Every time rejection stings more than it should, it's pointing to something deeper. Not just, they don't like me, but I haven't accepted this part of myself yet. Individuation demands you stop outsourcing your worth, that you stop negotiating for acceptance by being agreeable, likable, or impressive, and instead, you turn inward and ask, what am I still afraid to see in myself? What truth have I been running from? When you own your shadow, you end emotional dependence, because now, rejection has nowhere to land. No unhealed wound to trigger. You've already claimed it. This is the liberation Jung hinted at. The moment you say, yes, I'm imperfect. Yes, I have darkness, and I still choose me. You become whole. That kind of self-possession is rare and magnetic, because once you no longer need approval, you radiate a quiet confidence that no argument, no validation, and no rejection can shake. And this is why rejection isn't destruction, it's your initiation. The worst rejection you'll ever experience won't come from the outside. It won't be the no you feared or the silence that stung. The most devastating rejection is the one you've learned to live with. The quiet, invisible betrayal of yourself. Every time you say yes when you meant no. Every time you smile to keep the peace. Every time you hide what matters just to stay liked or accepted, you chip away at your integrity. And slowly, something fractures. Not your reputation, your sense of self. Carl Jung understood this as the core tragedy of the modern psyche. We trade authenticity for belonging. We abandon our truth to remain inside the tribe, only to find that no amount of external approval can ever repair what we gave up internally. It's why you can be surrounded by people, even admired, and still feel hollow. Because deep down, you know you're being accepted for someone you're pretending to be. And this is where shame is born, not from being rejected by others, but from knowing that you rejected yourself first. You became a mirror for their comfort and a stranger to your own reflection. But there's a gift hidden in that pain. Every moment of self-abandonment is also a signal, a red flag from your unconscious that says, you've drifted too far, come back to yourself. And if you have the courage to listen, to stop chasing, to stop contorting, to stop editing your truth for mass appeal, you begin to reverse the pattern. You stop performing. You begin remembering who you were before fear taught you to shrink, filter, and disappear. And here's the paradox. The moment you choose yourself without apology, you begin to attract what's real. Not because you forced it, but because people finally meet the version of you who's not begging to be chosen. So if you want to stop fearing rejection, you must stop rejecting yourself first. Have you ever noticed how the same patterns keep showing up in your life? Different names, different faces, but the same rejections, the same frustrations, the same sense of not being seen, not being enough. That isn't coincidence. It's psychology. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is the nature of the shadow. When you avoid it, it doesn't disappear. It just disguises itself. In your relationships, your habits, your emotional reactions, repetition is the psyche's alarm system. And every rejection you experience isn't just painful, it's precise. It's a roadmap, a spotlight on the unhealed place in you that still craves, still fears, still waits for someone else to fix it. But instead of facing that wound, what do? We project. We say, they're selfish. They don't understand me. They always leave. But often, the real question is, what am I still not willing to feel? What part of me have I refused to take responsibility for? Because projection isn't protection. It's a distraction. And every time you point outward, you delay the moment you finally turn inward. This is where transformation stops being a concept and starts being a choice. To break the cycle, You must face the repetition. You must stop asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me about myself?" Because life will keep sending the same lessons until you learn them, until you stop avoiding your own reflection in the people who trigger you the most. And here's the shift. When you finally face that pain, you stop being a victim of rejection. You start using it as feedback, as fuel, as direction. But even if you stop fearing rejection, what happens when you start welcoming it? There's a myth we've been sold, that to be attractive, you must appear untouchable, polished, perfect, emotionally bulletproof. But in truth, people aren't drawn to perfection. They're drawn to presence. And presence begins with radical self-honesty. Because the real magnetism, it isn't charm, it isn't strategy. It's the quiet power of someone who's not hiding anything, especially not from themselves. Vulnerability, when it's integrated, doesn't come off as fragility. It comes off as depth. You're not bleeding your emotions onto others. You're simply unafraid to be seen, not just in your strength, but in your story. That quiet magnetism isn't inherited. It's carved through self-honesty and inner discipline. Why? Because most people are trapped in performance. They speak to impress, not to connect. They love to avoid loneliness, not to express truth. But when you speak from a place of grounded awareness, when you no longer need someone to rescue, validate, or complete you, because presence isn't a personality trait, it's the byproduct of self-integration. This is what draws people in and makes them feel safe around you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real and rare. Emotional independence doesn't mean isolation. It means you've learned how to hold yourself before expecting anyone else to. And that kind of emotional posture, that's what makes people listen when you speak. Lean in when you're quiet. Respect you when you say nothing at all. But here's the key. This kind of presence is earned through uncomfortable conversations with yourself, through brutal honesty about what still hurts, and through the courage to stop performing and start showing up. When you stop needing to be liked, you start being trusted. And trust, in the deepest sense, is what makes a soul unforgettable. And that's where true detachment begins. Not in apathy, but in alignment. We often mistake detachment for indifference, as if to let go means to not care, as if choosing yourself means turning your back on others. But real detachment, the kind rooted in emotional maturity, isn't cold. It's clear. It's the quiet decision to stop begging the world to confirm your worth. Because here's the truth. The more you validate yourself internally, the less you chase validation externally. And when that shift happens, when you no longer need to be chosen to feel enough, you become magnetic. Why? Because magnetic people don't need. They resonate. They don't demand space. They hold a presence that others feel in silence. Not because they're trying, but because they've stopped trying. They've chosen themselves without waiting for permission. And that choice, that unwavering self-alignment, radiates. This is emotional sovereignty, and it doesn't come from withdrawing from the world. It comes from standing fully in your truth, without needing others to applaud it. It means you can hold space for rejection without collapsing. You can be misunderstood without defending. You no longer need agreement to stay rooted in your value. This kind of detachment isn't a wall, it's a boundary. It doesn't keep love out. It keeps self-betrayal out. Because when you've chosen yourself, you've already made the most important commitment. Everything else becomes a bonus, not a lifeline. So ask yourself, when was the last time you acted from truth, rather than from the fear of losing approval? Because every time you prioritize authenticity over acceptance, you train your nervous system to believe I am safe without applause. I am complete without permission. But what if you never needed anyone's approval in the first place? Here's one of the most paradoxical truths in human psychology. The more you chase something, the more it runs from you. We've all felt it. The harder you try to be liked, the more invisible you feel. The more you seek validation, the more people pull away. Why does this happen? Because chasing emits a signal. Lack, and the nervous system, on a primal level, interprets lack as instability. People aren't repelled by your personality. They're repelled by the energy of neediness. It doesn't matter how kind, talented, or well-intentioned you are. If your energy whispers, "Please, choose me," others will instinctively back away. But here's the reversal. The moment you stop trying to be chosen, you become magnetic. When you no longer orbit around approval, but instead orbit around purpose, you send a different signal, one of sovereignty, alignment, and quiet confidence. Jung understood this dynamic. He saw that true attraction comes from integration, not from strategy. When you choose yourself fully, unapologetically, others begin to feel your gravity, not because you pulled them in, but because you stopped chasing them away. This is inverse psychology at its most powerful. The more you release the need for connection, the more authentic connection finds you. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're no longer trying to get at all. You're not performing to be liked. You're building a life so true, approval becomes irrelevant, and people feel it. They feel when you're not marketing yourself, when you're not performing closeness, when you've chosen depth over validation. That energy, it's rare, and anything rare becomes desirable. So, instead of asking, "How do I get them to like me?" the better question is, what version of me would I follow if I wasn't me? Live from that. Choose yourself like someone worth following, and let the rest catch up on their own. And here's the final twist. The people you admire, they stop seeking. We live in a world curated to appear flawless. One scroll through social media, and it's all there. The perfect morning routine, the smiling couples, the glowing skin, the never-ending wins. No doubt, no mess, no rejection, at least not on camera. And we buy into it, not just visually, but psychologically. We begin to believe that to be accepted, to be worthy, to be loved, we must also be polished, unblemished, unbreakable. But here's what no one teaches you. Perfection is a performance, and like any performance, it's hollow without story. It hides more than it reveals. Behind most perfect images is fear. Fear of being seen too clearly, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being rejected for what is raw, vulnerable, unfinished. That fear teaches us to mask our struggle, to pose instead of process, to edit our emotional wounds like we do our photos. But that comes at a cost, because every time you hide your scars, you lose the one thing that actually connects you to others, your humanity. Think about the people who have truly moved you, who made you stop scrolling. Lean in, listen. Were they flawless, or were they real? Were they untouched by pain, or did they let you see their healing? That's the paradox. Scars are not signs of failure. They're proof of survival. They say, "I've been there. I've faced something hard, and I didn't fold." That's not weakness. That's inner gravity. And in a world where most people are still performing strength, that is magnetic. Carl Jung believed that wholeness isn't found in perfection, but in integration, not denying the wound, but digesting it, owning it, letting it shape you, not shame you. When you metabolize rejection, you turn pain into power. You take what once broke you and convert it into presence. This isn't about romanticizing pain or making struggle your identity. It's about refusing to run from the parts of you that life has already asked to grow. So don't hide your scars. Don't wrap them in silence. Truth doesn't sting because it's ugly. It stings because it's unedited. Let them be seen. Let them breathe. Let them tell the world, this is how I became who I am. Because someone out there doesn't need your perfection. They need your truth. And maybe, so do you. Because the most powerful people didn't avoid pain. They metabolized it. And that's exactly what made them unforgettable. What if you never needed approval again? Let's be honest. Rejection only has power over you when you still believe you need to be accepted to be whole. But the moment you stop outsourcing your worth, rejection becomes irrelevant. Not because it stops happening, but because it stops defining you. That's when something rare happens. You begin to radiate a different kind of energy. One that doesn't beg to be seen, but can't be ignored. This is the foundation of true magnetism. Not charm, not perfection, but inner clarity. The kind of clarity that says, I know who I am, and I'm no longer available for anything that costs me that. You stop chasing. You stop apologizing. You stop adjusting your truth to fit someone else's comfort. And people feel it. They may not be able to explain it, but they sense something different. A person who lives as if external validation is a footnote, not a requirement. That kind of presence is rare, and therefore, unforgettable. So, I'll leave you with this. What would your life look like if you never needed anyone's approval again? Not tomorrow, not someday, now.